The day she fed the poor old woman, the wind stopped blowing. Even the trees bowed still, as if the earth itself was listening. Abeni stood at her doorway, watching the violent storm tear through her village. Rain lashed the ground like angry whips. Thunder roared overhead. Then she saw her. A frail old woman, bent like a broken branch, trembling in the mud. Her wrapper clung to her bony frame, soaked and torn. Her eyes, clouded with age, looked up at Abeni with silent desperation. Without thinking, Abeni stepped into the storm and pulled the woman inside. The moment the old woman crossed the threshold, the wind died. Completely. The rain continued, but softly now, like whispers. Abeni's heart pounded. She looked outside. Nothing moved. Not a leaf. Not a breath. She turned back to the woman, who stood dripping on her floor, staring at her with eyes that suddenly seemed too knowing, too deep. The woman's cracked lips parted slowly. "Your kindness," she whispered, her voice like wind through dry grass, "will be tested by gold and shadow." Morning came with cruel laughter. Abeni woke to the sound of voices outside her small mud house. She pushed open her wooden door and saw her neighbors gathered near the well, pointing and whispering. "She shelters witches now," one woman said loudly, making sure Abeni could hear. "That old hag she brought in last night, who knows what curse she's invited." Another man spat into the dust. "Kindness can't fill your belly, Abeni. You're a fool." Abeni said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was her only shield in this village. They mocked her because she was a widow with no husband to defend her. They mocked her because she was poor. She walked back inside, her chest tight with shame. But when she turned to check on the old woman, her breath caught in her throat. The woman was gone. Vanished. Only the wooden bowl of soup Abeni had given her remained on the floor. Abeni bent down slowly. The soup was still warm, untouched, and faintly glowing. By midday, her peace was shattered. Heavy footsteps approached her door. Abeni looked up and saw him. Oba, her late husband's brother. A man whose belly was always full and whose heart was always empty. He was the landlord now, the one who owned half the village and wanted the other half. He stood in her doorway, blocking the sunlight, his thick arms crossed over his chest. "Abeni," he said with a cold smile. "Rent is due." Her stomach dropped. "Oba, please. The rains destroyed my crops. I have nothing this month." His smile widened. "Nothing? Then I will take your land. This house. Everything." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Please. Give me time." Oba leaned closer, his breath sour. "Time is for the rich, woman. You have 3 days." He turned and walked away, laughing. Abeni sank to her knees in the dirt, staring at her barren field. She whispered into the wind, "Even dust feeds the faithful." That night, something changed. Abeni could not sleep. A strange feeling pressed on her chest, pulling her outside. The sky above her field glowed faintly, like the edge of dawn, though it was still deep night. She walked slowly toward her land, her bare feet sinking into the dry soil. Then she saw it. Her crops. The yams she had planted months ago, the ones that had withered and died under the sun, were growing. Right before her eyes. Green shoots pushed up through the earth, twisting and rising like fingers reaching for the sky. Leaves unfurled. Stems thickened. Within minutes, her entire field was covered in lush, healthy plants. Abeni fell to her knees, trembling. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. The voice of the old woman. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The earth remembers," it whispered, "who fed her." Abeni's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. The next morning, Abeni returned to her field, thinking she had dreamed it all. But the green plants were still there, thick and alive. Her hands shook as she knelt and began to dig. She pulled up the first yam. It was large, perfect, and heavy. But as the soil fell away, something else gleamed in the sunlight. A coin. Golden. Solid. Real. She gasped and dropped it. Then she dug up another yam. Another coin. And another. And another. Every yam in her field had a golden coin buried beneath it. Tears poured down her face. She pressed her hands to her mouth, trying not to scream with joy. She had to tell someone. She had to share this miracle. She stood and ran toward the village, clutching a coin in her palm. But as she ran, she did not see him. Oba. Standing behind a tall palm tree at the edge of her land. Watching. His eyes burned with envy. His fist clenched. And in his heart, a dark seed began to grow. Abeni had not always been alone. Once, she had a husband. Chidi. A man with strong hands and a gentle heart. He walked the land beside her, laughing even when the rains failed. But 3 years ago, the debt collectors came. Men with hard faces and harder voices, sent by Oba to seize their land for unpaid taxes. Chidi had stood in their way. "You will not take what we built," he had shouted. They beat him. Right there in the field. Abeni had screamed and begged, but they did not stop. Chidi died that night, his body broken, his spirit undefeated. Since then, Abeni had lived quietly, humbly, surviving on scraps and prayers. The village pitied her, but no one helped her. She had learned to carry her grief like water in a cracked pot, slow and steady, never spilling. That evening, the village elder came to her door. He was old, his face lined like dried riverbeds. He looked at her softly. "Abeni," he said, "the dead test the living through the poor." She did not understand. But she would. Soon. Abeni could not keep the blessing to herself. Her heart would not allow it. She took part of her newfound wealth and bought rice, yams, oil, and meat from the market. She cooked a great feast and invited the entire village. Even those who had mocked her. Even those who had turned away when she begged for help. They came slowly, ashamed but hungry. The smell of her cooking filled the air, rich and warm. Children laughed. Old women smiled. Even the men, who had once called her foolish, ate in silence, humbled. Abeni served them with her own hands, her face glowing with joy. For the first time in years, the village felt whole. But as the sun set and the people left, whispers began. "Where did she get the money?" one woman asked. "She had nothing yesterday. Today she feeds us all." Another man shook his head darkly. "It must be devil's gold. She made a deal with something evil." And the whispers spread like smoke. 2 days later, Oba returned. But this time, he did not shout. He smiled. A wide, false smile that did not reach his eyes. "Abeni," he said sweetly, stepping into her home without permission. "I heard about your good fortune. I am happy for you." She stood still, watching him carefully. "Thank you, Oba." He walked around her small room, touching her things, inspecting her walls. "You know," he said slowly, "wealth can be dangerous for a woman alone. Let me help you. I can manage your money. Protect you. Make sure no one cheats you." Abeni's stomach tightened. "I am fine, Oba. Thank you." His smile faded slightly. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I am sure." He stared at her for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. That night, Abeni woke suddenly. Her door was half open. She had locked it before bed. She lit a small candle and walked slowly to the entrance. There, in the dirt, were muddy footprints, leading inside, and then back out. Abeni could not sleep after that. The next night, she stayed awake, sitting in the darkness by her window, waiting. Just after midnight, she saw him, Oba, moving like a shadow across her land, heading toward her yam field. He carried a hoe and a sack. Anger burned in her chest. She wrapped her cloth around her shoulders and followed him silently. The moon was bright. She crouched behind a low bush and watched. Oba knelt in the dirt, digging frantically, muttering to himself. He has something. I know it. It's here. It must be here. He dug deeper. Faster. Sweat poured down his face. Then his hoe struck something hard. He grinned and reached down with both hands. The moment his fingers touched the soil, the earth rumbled. Oba screamed. His hand jerked back as if burned. He fell backward, clutching his palm, his eyes wide with terror. Abeni's heart pounded. She stepped out from the shadows. Oba saw her and scrambled to his feet, running. But Abeni did not chase him. She only whispered, "The earth knows." By morning, the entire village knew. Oba's right hand was covered in golden blisters. They glowed faintly, like embers under ash. He screamed in pain, but no medicine helped. No water cooled it. The village healer, an old woman with sharp eyes, examined his hand and stepped back in fear. "This is not a wound," she said quietly. "This is a mark." "A mark of what?" Oba shouted. The healer looked him in the eyes. "The spirit you touch burns liars." Oba's face went pale. He looked around at the crowd gathered outside his house. They stared at him with suspicion now. "Fear. What did you do, Oba?" one man asked. "What did you try to steal?" Oba said nothing. He wrapped his hand in cloth and locked himself inside his house. But the whispers followed him. And at night, when he closed his eyes, he heard it. A voice. Soft. Mocking. "Greed," it whispered, "has a price." And his hand burned hotter. 3 days later, a messenger arrived at Abeni's door. He wore the chief's colors. Red and gold. He did not smile. "The chief summons you," he said flatly. "Come now." Abeni's heart sank. She followed him through the village, feeling every eye on her. The villagers whispered as she passed. When she reached the chief's compound, she was led into a large hall. The chief sat on a carved wooden chair, surrounded by elders. His face was hard. Cold. "Abeni," he said slowly. "Explain yourself." She swallowed. "I do not understand, my lord." He leaned forward. "You were poor yesterday. Today you have gold. You fed the village like a queen. Where did this wealth come from?" Abeni's voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. "From kindness, my lord. I fed a poor woman. The next day, my crops bloomed. I found coins in my field." The chief's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that?" "It is the truth." He stood. "Truth or trickery?" The elders murmured. Abeni felt tears prick her eyes, but she held her head high. "I swear it, my lord. I did nothing wrong." That night, Abeni sat alone in her home, her heart heavy. She poured water into a clay bowl to wash her face. But as she looked down, her breath caught. The water was still. Too still. And then she saw it. A reflection. Not her own. The old woman. Her face appeared in the water, clear and calm. Her eyes looked directly at Abeni. Abeni gasped and stumbled backward. But the voice came anyway. Soft. Steady. "Do not fear, daughter." Abeni's lips trembled. "Who are you?" The reflection smiled. I am the one who watches. The one who weighs hearts. You fed me when you had nothing. That is why you are blessed. Tears rolled down Abeni's cheeks. But they do not believe me. They call me a thief. A witch. The spirit's voice grew firm. Every gift reveals a heart. Protect yours, Abeni. The storm is not over. The reflection faded. The water was just water again. But Abeni's hands still shook. She whispered into the silence, I will protect it. I promise. The next morning, the village gathered in the square. The chief stood before them, his voice loud and commanding. Abeni, daughter of the soil, has been accused. Accused of witchcraft. Accused of stealing sacred gold from the earth. Gasps spread through the crowd. Abeni stood in the center, her head bowed. She said nothing. The chief continued. She claims her wealth came from kindness. But how can kindness turn dust into gold? How can a widow, cursed by poverty, suddenly feast like a queen? The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others looked away. Abeni lifted her head slowly. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I have done nothing wrong. The chief's face twisted. Then prove it. Before she could speak, the sky darkened. A low rumble of thunder roared across the heavens. The villagers looked up nervously. The wind began to stir. And in that moment, Abeni felt it. The presence. The same presence from the night of the storm. It was here. Watching. Waiting. The air grew heavy. And then the rain began. But this was no ordinary rain. The first drop hit the ground and split open with a soft clink. A coin. Golden. Perfect. Another drop fell. Another coin. And another. The villagers screamed and scattered, covering their heads. Coins fell from the sky like hail, bouncing off the ground, ringing like bells. The chief stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror. Abeni stood still, her arms outstretched, her face turned upward. The rain did not touch her. The coins fell around her in a circle, but not on her. And then the voice came. Deep. Everywhere. Shaking the earth. Do you still call her cursed? The villagers fell to their knees. Some wept. Others pressed their faces into the dirt. The chief's lips trembled. He could not speak. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The coins lay scattered across the square, glittering in the sunlight. Abeni lowered her arms slowly. She looked at the chief. Her voice was soft. I told you the truth. He said nothing. But his hands shook. But jealousy is a poison that does not wash away easily. That night, the chief sat alone in his room, staring at the coins he had collected from the square. His heart burned with envy. She has been chosen, he muttered. But why her? Why not me? He clenched his fist. By morning, he had made his decision. He called the elders together and declared, Abeni's land must be seized. For the good of the village. Her wealth is too great for one woman. It must be shared. The elders protested weakly, but none dared to challenge him openly. That afternoon, the chief's men came to Abeni's home. You must leave, they said. By order of the chief. Abeni looked at them with calm, sad eyes. This is my home. Not anymore. She did not fight. She did not cry. She simply gathered a small bundle of cloth, tied it to her back, and walked away. The villagers watched in silence as she headed toward the forest. The forest no one dared to enter. And no one followed her. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. Only the sound of Abeni's footsteps on the soft earth. As she walked deeper, the trees seemed to lean inward, their branches forming a canopy that blocked the sky. Then she heard it. Whispers. Her name. Abeni. Abeni. She stopped, her heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, layered, as if many voices spoke at once. She turned in every direction, but saw no one. Then the trees began to show her things. Visions. Flickering images in the back. She saw herself as a child, laughing with her mother. She saw Chidi, her husband, holding her hand. She saw the night he died. She saw every tear she had cried. Every prayer she had whispered. The visions moved faster, swirling around her like a storm. She fell to her knees, covering her face. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." The whispers stopped. Silence. Then, between two great trees ahead, a doorway of light appeared. Shimmering. Inviting. Terrifying. Abeni stood slowly. And stepped forward. She entered a place that should not exist. A temple. But not made of stone. It was made of roots. Glass-like roots that glowed softly, twisting upward into a dome. The air inside was cool and still. Abeni walked forward slowly, her bare feet silent on the smooth ground. Then she heard her own voice. "I am not enough." It echoed through the temple, repeating over and over. "I am not enough, not enough, not enough." Her chest tightened. It was every doubt she had ever whispered to herself in the dark. Every fear. Every moment of despair. The temple was reflecting her heart. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But she did not run. She stood still and whispered back, "But I am here. I am still here." The echo stopped. And from the center of the temple, a figure emerged. A shadow. Then light. The old woman. But younger now. Her wrinkles were gone. Her eyes shone like stars. She wore white. Pure. Radiant. Abeni's breath caught. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "You already know." The woman stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound. She was beautiful. Terrifyingly so. Her presence filled the temple like sunlight fills a valley. "I am the one who tests," she said softly. "The one who weighs. I walk the world in rags to see who will feed me. Who will bow? Who will give when they have nothing?" Abeni's voice trembled. "Why me?" The woman tilted her head. "Because you were kind when kindness cost you everything." She raised her hand, and before Abeni, a chest appeared. Carved from gold. Glowing. Overflowing with coins, jewels, and treasures beyond imagination. The woman's voice was calm. "Take this. Endless wealth. You will never suffer again." "But..." She paused, her eyes locking onto Abeni's. "You will forget what kindness feels like. You will become what the chief is. Greedy. Empty." Abeni stared at the chest. Her heart ached with temptation. She could take it. She could be rich forever. But then she thought of the old woman shivering in the rain. She thought of the feast she had shared. She thought of Chidi's voice, "Wealth without love is just decorated loneliness." Abeni knelt. And whispered, "Peace is enough." The woman's face lit with a radiant smile. The chest vanished. And so did the shadows. The temple filled with light so bright Abeni had to close her eyes. When she opened them again, the woman had transformed. Her white robe shimmered like woven moonlight. Her hair floated as if underwater. Her skin glowed with the warmth of the sun. "I am H," the woman said, her voice like wind and water combined. "Goddess of wealth, fortune, and justice. I walk among mortals to test their hearts." Abeni's breath caught. She pressed her forehead to the ground. "Forgive me, Great One." Age knelt beside her and lifted her chin gently. "You have nothing to be forgiven for, daughter." You chose peace over gold. That is why you are worthy. Tears streamed down Abeni's face. What happens now? Age stood, and the temple began to tremble. The roots glowed brighter. Now, she said, her voice echoing, peace comes to you. In the language of your people. The ground shook. The light swallowed everything. And Abeni felt herself falling. Not down, but forward. Into something new. Back in the village, chaos erupted. Oba and the chief stood together at the edge of Abeni's old yam field. If she found gold here, the chief hissed, then so will we. Oba nodded, his burned hand still wrapped in cloth. Dig, he commanded his men. They dug. Deep. Frantic. The villagers gathered to watch, whispering nervously. Then one man's shovel struck something hard. Here, he shouted. I found it. The chief and Oba rushed forward, shoving him aside. They bent down, clawing at the dirt with their bare hands. But the moment their fingers touched the soil, the earth moved. It rippled. Like water. The men screamed and tried to pull back, but the ground grabbed them. Pulled them down. Help. Oba screamed, his eyes wide with terror. Help me. But no one moved. The earth swallowed them slowly. First their legs. Then their waists. Then their chests. The chief reached out one last time, his face twisted in horror. And then they were gone. The soil sealed itself smooth. Silent. As if nothing had ever been there. The villagers stood frozen. No one spoke. No one dared. 3 days later, Abeni returned. She walked into the village at dawn, calm and glowing. Her skin shone with a soft light. Her eyes were clear. Peaceful. The villagers saw her and fell to their knees. Forgive us, they whispered. Forgive us, Abeni. She did not speak at first. She simply walked through the square, her bare feet light on the ground. She stopped at the center, where the coins had once fallen. The elders approached slowly, their heads bowed. We were wrong, one said. We should have believed you. Abeni looked at them with soft eyes. I forgive you. They wept. She walked to her old home. It was empty now. Abandoned. She stood in the doorway and smiled faintly. Then she reached into the cloth bundle on her back. She pulled out a single yam. Wrapped in white cloth. The villagers watched in silence. Confused. Curious. Abeni knelt. And placed the yam gently on the ground. The earth beneath it began to glow. Abeni unwrapped the yam slowly. The white cloth fell away. The yam was large. Perfect. But as she held it, something strange happened. It grew warm. She lifted a small knife and carefully cut into it. The blade sank through easily. And from the center of the yam, gold coins poured out. More gold kept coming out. The villagers gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others covered their mouths in shock. The gold did not stop. It flowed and flowed, spreading across the earth in golden rivers. And wherever it touched, flowers bloomed. Grass turned green. The soil came alive. Then the voice returned. Age's voice. Soft. Everywhere. Kindness feeds the world. Now the world feeds her. The villagers wept. They understood now. Abeni had been chosen. Not because she was perfect, but because her heart was pure. She looked at them all with quiet strength. This is not mine alone, she said. It belongs to those who hunger. To those who give. To those who remember. And the gold continued to flow. Abeni used the flowing gold to build something the village had never seen. A home. Not for herself alone. But for the poor. The hungry. The forgotten. She fed travelers who passed through. She clothed orphans. She healed the sick with food made from her blessed land. Her home became a place of refuge. And word spread far beyond the village, beyond the hills, beyond the rivers. They said a woman lived there who could turn a single yam into a feast for 100 people. They said her food healed sorrow. That kings and beggars ate side by side at her table. And it was true. One evening, a man arrived in royal robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. He sat quietly at her table and ate. When he finished, he wept. I have eaten in palaces, he whispered. But I have never tasted peace until now. He left a bag of gold at her door. But Abeni gave it away the next morning. The cycle continued. The more she gave, the more she received. And her heart remained light. Years passed. Abeni grew older, but her spirit remained strong. One quiet night, as she sat by her fire, she heard a soft knock at her door. She opened it slowly. And there she was. Age. The spirit. The goddess. But this time, she was not disguised. She stood radiant, dressed in robes of white and gold, her eyes filled with warmth. You came back, Abeni whispered. Age smiled. I never left. She stepped inside and took Abeni's hands in hers. They were warm. Real. You have done well, daughter. You have fed the world without losing yourself. Abeni's eyes filled with tears. I only did what my heart told me. Age's voice was soft. And that is why your name will be remembered. Not because you became rich, but because you remained kind. She touched Abeni's hands gently. And as she did, a soft glow spread through Abeni's fingers. Up her arms. Into her chest. The heart that gives, Age whispered, becomes a fountain. And then she was gone. But Abeni felt it. The peace. The fullness. The eternal spring of joy within her. Many years later, long after Abeni had passed from the world, children still gathered in the village square to hear her story. The elders would sit beneath the great tree and speak in low, reverent voices. There once was a woman, they would say, who fed a beggar in the storm. And that beggar was no beggar at all. The children would lean in, eyes wide. She became a wealthy woman, one would ask. The elder would smile. Not in greed, child. In grace. They would tell of the yam that bled gold. Of the rain of coins. Of the earth that swallowed the greedy. And of the woman whose kindness fed a generation. The moral was always the same, whispered like a prayer. Kindness is the only treasure that multiplies when it is given. And as the sun set over the village, the wind would begin to blow again. Soft. Eternal. Carrying the story forward. Forever. And somewhere, in the space between worlds, Age smiled. Watching. Weighing. Waiting for the next heart brave enough to give when it has nothing. Because the test never ends. And the spirit never stops walking.